Good evening. Welcome to the Planning Board meeting for Wednesday, March 29th. Just a couple of reminders. If you're here to speak on an application, please fill out one of these yellow tickets there on the back table and bring them up, and we'll call you during that presentation. We ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes. If you're an applicant, remind you to keep your presentations to 30 minutes or less. Everybody, please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We're going to take where are we, number 5. One item out of order this evening. It is item number 5 is going to go first. It's the applicant here. Town Board application public hearing, 1825 Brentwood Road Associates LLC, CZ 2023-004, northeast side of Brentwood Road and 2nd Avenue, Brentwood, 1825 Brentwood Road. Applicant requests a change of zone from Business 1 to Business 3 and a Town Board special permit for a fast food restaurant pursuant to 68-302GA. Minor subdivision is also requested as part of this application. Site plan modifications may be required as part of the application. Good evening.
There you go. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Anthony Guardino, law firm of Farrell Fritz, representing the applicant, 1825 Brentwood Road Associates. I just want to hand up some books because I understand that you need the site plan. Thank you. So as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, the applicant is seeking a change of zone for a portion of the Brent City Shopping Center in Brentwood from B1 to B3. They will also need a town board special permit for a fast food restaurant and a minor subdivision for a parcel that is coterminous with what we hope will be rezoned to B3 in order to allow the existing Popeyes restaurant to add a drive-through window. I have with me tonight Tahir Qureshi from Long Island Engineering and Architecture, and also professional traffic engineer Wayne Muller from R&M Engineering. The property is located at the western portion of the Brent City Shopping Center at 1825 Brentwood Road. The shopping center is about 155,000 square feet in size. It's about 14 acres. It's located on the east side of Brentwood Road, north of 2nd Avenue. The property is a single tax lot, and it is all zoned B1 currently. There is on the property now a 43,000 square foot shopping center, an 11,000 square foot indoor soccer academy, 1,000 square foot freestanding, a fast food restaurant. And then there's of course, the existing 2,695 square foot Popeyes restaurant, which are on the property on a pad. You may remember that in 2015, I was before this board, and this board granted a special permit for the Popeyes on this site with outdoor seating and also a parking relaxation. And that resolution is in your packet at Exhibit 7. That building was designed at the time so that it could easily be modified to comply with a 2013 downtown Brentwood master plan that was prepared for the town by Saratoga and Associates. And that plan encouraged the uses in this area to front on and to have connectivity with Ross Park and First Avenue, which is actually a paper street in this area. The thought was in this report that someday, maybe someday, First Avenue might become a new main street. When the application was made, this shopping center was, and it still is, zoned B1, so there could not be a drive-through associated with the restaurant. But during the COVID pandemic, when restaurants were prohibited by the governor's executive order from providing indoor seating, this particular restaurant suffered greatly, while its fast food competitors flourished because they had a drive-through. When restaurants were able to open their doors to permit in-person dining, many fast food operators found that their customers actually preferred to continue to use the drive-through windows rather than to be served within the building. point is, drive-throughs are extremely important to fast food restaurants. Most will not build a restaurant. Most operators will not build a restaurant today, a fast food restaurant, without a drive-through. So to remain competitive, Popeyes really needs to have this drive-through in this existing building. The need for the drive-through here was discussed with members of the planning department, who were generally supportive of adding a drive-through, but not at the expense of compromising the original plan, which was to comply with the 2013 Saratoga plan and the goal of having the building connect with a future Main Street. So it was suggested that the applicant agree to execute a declaration of covenants and restrictions requiring it to reorient the building, basically the front of the building, flip it towards the future Main Street if this portion of First Avenue ever becomes that Main Street. I know that seems like a long way off, but if it happens, my client will be willing to just reorient the building and flip it around. I think they're willing to do it because I think we believe that is highly unlikely, but they would sign that covenant.
Mr. Guardino,
Yes.
let me ask you this. Have you seen the covenants that were sent over today by Mr. Colgan?
I did not.
Oh, okay. So
Okay,
that's gonna be
I apologize.
my main question, if you're in agreement with them. I was going to direct you just to go right to the site plan and show us certainly show
Sure.
presentation as long as you
No,
want.
I'm
Yeah.
basically done. So that's
Walk us through the drive-through part of it. I think we're in agreement in concept. Just show us where it is, how it
Okay.
functions, and that's it.
I apologize that I did not get a chance to see the covenants. Thank you, Sean. It was a crazy day today.
Good afternoon. I was the one who designed the original project, so it was already in the mind that someday we would have a drive-through here. So that's the way the owners were kind of hoping and thinking that they someday, but with a lot of other things happened since this business was open. We made the application and here we are. Actually, it's not going to require a lot of changes in the site. The small area which is on the north side, yes. So we are hoping and proposing also that the drive-through lane should be provided from the north side and wrap around on the west side, come back. And the building was already designed with the window location and the equipment setup. So it's going to be very minimum changes for the building to accommodate this new drive-through window. As far as the traffic flow, I think Wayne probably can elaborate on that. There's going to be very minor changes. There's not a whole lot changes to the site plan itself. Other than the drive-through lane itself, there is really not much change to the site.
So just tell us how many spots do you have in the queue?
Uh, 11,
11.
yes.
Okay. Any other questions about the site itself? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Guardino, anything further on your presentation?
Wayne Muller's here if the board wants to hear from him.
Let's find out. Let's see. Is anyone here who wishes to be heard on this application? I don't have any cards. Not seeing anyone. Why don't I go to Mr. Colgan for a report, and then we'll come back for any questions. And if we need Mr. Muller to answer anything, we'll call him up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Mr. Guardino did a very good job of summarizing how we've come to this point, so I'll be brief. With regards to the traffic, our traffic consultant reviewed the traffic study submitted by the applicant. He had recommended that the drive aisle that's immediately west to the drive-through, where you see on the site plans, you have northbound arrows. He actually recommended that those should be southbound only to reduce conflicts with people who might be coming out of the drive-through prematurely. The planning staff would opt that probably we could just remove that drive aisle and have drive-up parking, and that could be landscaped, and then that eliminates any conflict. And that shouldn't be much of a hardship because those cars parked on that portion of the site would be able to back out and leave anyway. So we can certainly go over that with the applicant. I think that would be a minor change. And again, with regards to the covenant and a possible future master plan adoption, given that yes, we do agree with the applicant, it will be years before such a plan would come to fruition. The staff believes that if the applicant agrees to the drive-through covenant, the zoning change would not be a major conflict with the comprehensive plan, as the applicant would be agreeing to adapt to the future change when something like a downtown character would be realistic and feasible. But again, we're a ways off. So in consideration of the applicant's economic hardship, we agree this would be a good compromise. And again, if and when sewers do reach this area, we'll visit that when it comes. So the staff has no objection to the application. The only other thing we just want to point out is that the applicant needs a one-car relaxation from the queuing because based on, I think, how the subdivision is drafted, one car would be off-site, which shouldn't compromise the rest of the shopping center, but technically is a relaxation. So just want to put that on the record for the board.
Mr. Guardino, anything you want to add to Ms. Colgan's comments?
No, all I'd like to say is I just would like to speak with my client on the covenant, so I apologize for not getting a chance to look at those. But I also want to speak with the operator because I want to make sure that he's okay with the proposed changes. But I'm sure we can work it out.
So a follow-up question becomes, I mean, if we're going to approve it tonight, do you want to do subject to, or do you want to reserve and hold?
If you would be willing to approve it subject to, that would be great. If that's an option, we absolutely would take that.
I think it is. I mean, the concern was the queue, but I've been to plenty of Popeyes before. I don't think they have the size of the drive-through queues as I've seen in some of the other,
I agree.
whether it be In-N-Out Burger out west or Chick-fil-A
Right,
here
right.
in New York, so I'm not as concerned.
Yes.
So unless, are there other questions from the board? Do you want anything further? Is there a motion?
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
Brown.
I'd like to make a motion to grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions being worked out with the planning staff and the applicant.
Is a motion by Mr. Brown to close the public hearing and grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions being agreed to between the planning department and the applicant. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Bruno. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The application is granted.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And thank you for taking this out of order.
Thank
I do appreciate that.
Just for the record, item 4 on the agenda has been adjourned this evening. We're going to item 1, Planning Board Application Public Hearing, Menino Brothers, 1575 Realty Corp., PB 2022-025, north side of Montauk Highway, State Route 27A, approximately 100 feet east of Forbes Street, Oakdale, 1575 Montauk Highway. Applicant requests a modification of Planning Board special permit conditions associated with PB 2016-028 in order to expand the existing restaurant. Site plan modifications may also be requested as part of the application. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you? Joe Deal with Bowler. I'm a partner, and the address is 275 Broad Hollow Road, Melville, New York. I have the mailings.
We will take those and make them part of the record.
I also have exhibits to hand up for the board as well.
We'll make those part of the record as well. Thank you.
Yeah. So we were originally in front of the board in 2016 with an expansion to the restaurant. And at the time, pretty much all aspects of the expansion were discussed and kind of gotten favorable feedback from the board. But the one issue was the waiver that we had on parking. And the recommendation of the board was to try to obtain some additional parking around the area so that they'd have additional parking stalls. So pretty much over the last couple of years, Mr. Menino has spent time in purchasing different properties around the area so that he can also ultimately do the vision that he has, which is to expand the restaurant. So on the first exhibit that I gave to you, the shaded area in the middle is the existing restaurant as it is today. The yellow shaded to the west is a property that was purchased. It's a real estate agency that Mr. Menino owns now. The blue shaded property was also purchased, which was a residential house, which was demolished and is going to be part of this application for additional parking. The purple shaded was also purchased by Mr. Menino That is what is existing today, Island Empanada. So on the first floor, it's Island Empanada. On the top floor, there's a couple of offices up there. And it's an odd-shaped lot that was purchased. You can see the back piece of it too. That's in the purple. And then the last piece that he also purchased is the green shaded as well, which was an existing parking area that had been there for a while and used as parking. So over the last 6-7 years, these are the items and Mr. Menino has purchased. So he ultimately put together the plan, which we'll talk about in a second. On the second page, I have the floor plan just real quick. The main purpose.
If I could just interrupt you 1 second. Mr. Bruno has a question.
You said he purchased the green area
Yes.
that's parking. Who was that from whose parking was that?
So it was a separate entity that owned the parking, and they had, years ago, they had an agreement to lease some of the parking. We have a copy. It was given to the planning department.
Was it linked to any of the other buildings?
So at one time, it was linked to the Thai Show restaurant which is I guess that would be the southeast corner of the lot. We have an exhibit prior to him purchasing the property. There's a signed affidavit, which we gave to the planning department, that shows that they haven't paid rent or technically should be using the parking since 2008, I think it was.
What I'm trying to find out is if your client is taking that parking, what happens to the parking that's supposed to belong to? That's really my question.
Correct. So the agreement that was made that we talked with the planning department was that we're not going to close off the parking. We're going to leave it open so it still pass through on there. So we're not going to forbid anybody from parking and kind of have it used as it could be joint parking.
Okay, but not to belabor this, but what's the required parking for that restaurant?
So
Is it the amount that's here?
it's not part, I understand, but it's not part of the application, that restaurant
That's
on
right.
here, that parcel.
I understand, but if you're
purchase.
taking the parking that went to that restaurant, I'm sorry,
Why don't you ask Kelly if she has the answer to that, if she knows it for the restaurant?
I'm sorry.
I mean, maybe Ms. Wozniak knows the number of spots required for the,
Yeah,
Don't have the required parking for restaurants.
what I'm trying to find out is
Yeah.
whether they have parking to share. In other words, if that's the amount that's required for the restaurant, and you say we want to share it, if you say it's overparked
I
and
have
there's a
that.
certain number, that's fine, but if it's not, I don't see how you can do that, saying, okay, 2 restaurants are going to share this even though the other restaurant fully needs it under the code. So if you can get to that, that's what I'm
Yeah.
really trying to find out.
Let me get you some more, I have some more data, so let me get
Okay.
to that, and then I'll answer some of the questions as well.
Thank you very much.
But I just do want to say that back in 2003, there was a lease that was signed. The lease was for 5 years, renewable, and the tenant did not want to renew the lease. And then we have the exhibit of that. those minutes.
Which tenant?
Thai Show,
The one on the corner?
correct. And they haven't renewed, it hasn't been a executed lease.
So you're telling me under this, the only parking that the one on the corner has is that little lot that's on there that they have
That's what they have on, so that's the property.
on
they-
site?
That's the property that they own, and the property behind it they don't own. And like I said, they had a lease that's no longer executed.
Okay, because my question is going to be whether their requirements, in other words, you're saying they have the lease, but the question is, was it a requirement of them to have that lease? I don't know, I'm sure it was a requirement.
Reno did submit affidavit from the property owner of the sushi restaurant saying they no longer want to lease parking from that.
Are we saying that corner can no longer, okay, they don't want to lease it, but are we saying that that restaurant no longer needs that number of parking spaces?
So technically they are in violation of it.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Okay, thank you very much.
And I'll go through some more numbers to answer the question. No problem. So just real quickly on the second page, just to show you in the board of what we're doing, what the expansion actually is. If you look in the top right-hand corner, we're expanding the kitchen. The kitchen for the restaurant is very small, so we're putting on about 500 square feet of the addition of a kitchen. On the top of the page, you'll see a proposed hallway, which is the bump out of the back of the building, which goes across to the west side of the building, which is to be able to feed the dining on the west side. And then the proposed dining on the west side of the building, although it's proposed dining, if you've eaten there today, there used to be outdoor, and then it was enclosed in on the west side of the building. So if you were there many years ago, you saw it was more outdoor eating that they had that was moderately, let's call it, enclosed, and then through time got permanently enclosed and got a violation from the fire department. So part of this is, let's call it also like a legalization of what we're trying to do. We're going to take down what's there, and we're going to put the seating back, but encompass all of this development that we're doing. So the net number of seating that we're doing, we're not really adding seating overall. We're legalizing, let's call that dining area that's there right now. Yeah,
The seating that you're saying you're not adding,
correct.
that was there, but it's not legal.
That's just for the sake of usage.
What does the CO say?
Yes, it's not legal, but I'm using for the sake of usage that for many years, the number of seats that's been used there.
I understand, but you're saying, what you're representing is that there's no increase in seating. So it's all tied together.
I'm
I'm
getting-
trying to find
yeah.
out if there's an increase in seating, and if there's an increase in seating, I want to see an increase in parking.
Yes.
And if the parking is being used by somebody else, it's all one
I'm gonna
thing
get
to
there. I
me.
promise you I'm going to get there.
Okay.
I promise you I'll put it together. I promise. So we're putting dining on that west side. There's dining there existing now, correct? Not legal part of the CO, but there is dining presently right there. So what we're adding is the addition of the kitchen, the back proposed hallway, the dining that's on the west side, and in front of that, there's going to be a proposed waiting area. If you've been there before and during rush and high times, there's not a place for people to wait for the seats. So everybody's in the bar area, so they have a little waiting area that they're proposing now so people can wait before they sit down. So that's what the proposal is for the addition. It's different parts of the building that's being added. It's not just all seating. So if we flip over to the next page, we get a bigger view of what ultimately is happening. So we have, once again, he purchased lot 28, which is to the west of us, which is right now a real estate agency, which is more of a 9 to 5 building. So in the evening, he parks his employees' cars there. We have lot 44.1, which is the main lot, and then lot 42.3, which is that single family residence that was demolished and is incorporated now into the parking. And then we're redoing lot 40, which is part of what was I showed as part of the island empanada, so that we can do a pass through and connect everything, and you can go all the way through to the site. So there's connectivity, which was discussed with the planning department as well. Lot 39, lot 38, and lot 37 is what we were discussing, is staying as is on there. And when we look at this and we look at parking numbers, we did this and broke it down 2 different ways, as we discussed with the planning department. From an overall standpoint, if you take the overall required stalls, which includes the island empanada, which is the lot 34.1. If you include lot 37, 38, 39, and 40, which is the 3 lots to the right, the 42.3 and the 44.1, the required parking for that, if you do the takeoff, which doesn't include, and this does not include Thai Show, but includes Island Empanada, the offices, and the Meninos. The required parking is 161 stalls. What we're providing right now is 144 in the plan that you're looking at right now. Right? Currently out there, the Meninos, as of today, currently has 69 stalls on the site right now. With the proposed plan that we're doing, and if you look at it and look at it from lots 44, 42.3, and lot 40, before you go into lots 39, 38, 37, just what you consider like the Meninos lots, just those alone increase the parking to 106 for Meninos. So Meninos will increase from 69 to 106. That's right in their area behind their restaurant that's there. If you look in the, and with that, on top of that, The required for Menino's for parking stalls, just Menino's alone is 125. So we would be providing 106 stalls. But if you look at the last exhibit that we put together as well, they do, in prime times, they do valet parking. So we made a very moderate valet parking type exhibit, which shows you can easily park an additional 25 additional stalls on the lot, and which gives you a total of 131, providing strictly just for the Menino's portion of the property. So and maybe that helps answer the question a little bit, just on that, on the Menino's portion of it alone. Good.
Do the required spots that you've calculated on there include the seats that are not approved? Or is that for what's approved?
The required includes what the proposed number of seats are going to be. So the proposed number of seats are going to be 126, and the required is based on 126. So the purpose of me bringing up that the dining was already there was that the usage that has been going on has been really around the same amount of seats. We're not increasing it, that usage. It's not about, we're not doing the expansion based on seats. The expansion is based on operations and parking. And to legalize with the fire department violation that we have to remove the addition. So it all ties together. It's like a comprehensive master plan that we've been putting together to buy the property to be able to do all this that you see in front of you. All right, questions? Oh, let me have one other thing is the landscaping. There is also a waiver being requested for the percentage of landscaping in the front yard, which is existing. It's called existing non-conforming because it doesn't meet it as it is today. And then also the overall landscaping. I think if you've been there, the landscaping is meticulous, but the balance between getting the parking stalls versus adding in a certain amount of landscaping is what we went back and forth with.
Do you want to ask a question now, Mr. Burrow?
What's that?
You want to do your question now? Do you want to ask your question now or wait for the public? Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Bruno.
Okay, this is in a sensitive zone with the health department.
Correct.
And so I understand also that Mr. Menino has to gather property to make his density.
No. So what we did was we already got our health department approval for the site. We also, during COVID, when the restaurant was closed for a while, we installed the new septic system in there
Okay,
and we designed it for the side number of seats that we're proposing.
okay. And that was only up to and including lot 40.
That was for his restaurant, which is 44 and 42 is where the septic system is. It is not on lot 40, the septic system.
Okay, but I'm saying his density included up to,
I'm sorry, it did not include lot 40 in that. When we did the density calculations, he did
okay,
not,
and obviously, I'm just checking, and not 37, 38,
Correct.
39, or
he did not need it.
34.1.
Yeah,
He
we-
only used those other ones.
Yes.
Okay,
34.1 and 40 he purchased after we got our approval, had nothing to do with the sanitary
okay.
submission.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand if there's a,
Yes.
to be blunt, I'm trying to make sure there isn't a double dip going on with a
No.
bunch of these.
We-
That's what I'm checking on.
This has been 7 years in the making of trying to working with the health
Oh, that I
department, working
believe.
with the planning department, and working with purchasing properties to do
Okay.
this and fix the operations and make it better for the community and have more parking.
Okay, thank you.
Just one question for you. Does the calculation you've done for the seating include the outdoor, the tent seating, or no? Or is that just for the
No.
main structure?
No, the tent is
So-
not, tent is temporary, it's not going to stay.
And temporary ones, are you using the full year that granted, or are you have plans to take it down sooner?
I have to talk to Mr. Benino on that,
Okay.
and I have the answer.
Why don't we go to the public hearing and then we'll come back
Okay.
and ask questions from the board after the staff report. Mr. Brown.
Bill Mullaney.
Good evening. My name is Bill Mullaney, and I live at 23 Commercial Avenue, which is directly behind Menino's Restaurant. I have several concerns about the proposed addition to the current restaurant, one being the parking. You hit on some of the subject, but I'd like to hit on them again. Several years ago at a similar hearing, it was noted that Menino's did not have enough parking for the seats they had at the time, with many of those seats being illegal. Since then, they have added a few spots, but not many. The current proposal shows that they will be utilizing parking spots in lots 37, 38, 39, and 173. Although these lots are currently owned by John Menino, they are being utilized for the restaurant and offices next door to Menino's. Unless there are plans to close Island Empanada and vacate the offices, the spaces designated for them cannot be used in the total count for Menino's. In addition, the Japanese restaurant next to Island Empanada has only 5 current parking spaces, as Menino's does not permit any of their customers to park in his lot, which they had done in the past. Clearly, that's not sufficient for the number of seats that restaurant has. The lack of parking is eminently clear on weekends and holidays when cars are legally parked along both Forbes Street and Commercial Avenue, even though both of these streets are designated as no parking. Regardless of the number of times the town installs no parking signs, they are removed shortly thereafter. The town has indicated they know who's doing it, but nothing's been done. The illegal parking of cars will only get worse with any expansion. Right now, cars drive up and down the blocks surrounding Menino's in search of parking. And this is for a restaurant where customers arrive at different times. If John has proposed doing events, if they will be arriving for events, the arrivals will be at the same time, as will the departures. We currently have issues with valets sounding the car alarms to locate cars and loud conversations from people in the parking lot, as there's really no barrier between the parking lot and our front yard. This will be unbearable if events end and many people want their cars at the same time. The streets north of Main Street have always been residential. John's done his best to buy houses and tear them down to change that, but it's been residential. The past few years have seen a noticeable increase in traffic and noise, and frankly, it's dangerous for the grandkids to ride bikes or to play basketball on the street. Any expansion coupled with relaxation of parking requirements will make this worse. I'd like you to please consider the safety and well-being of your residents with regard to this proposal. Thank you.
Blake Farnsworth.
Good evening. My name is Blake Farnworth. I live at 195 Bridal Way, which is south of Montauk, but I grew up at 23 Commercial Avenue, which is where my mother lives presently with Bill Lane. 10 years ago, I stood before the planning board crying, asking for shreds of my childhood to be preserved. The calm and quiet place where I have lived for 25 years, where my mother had lived for more than 30 years, where my grandfather had grown up, and where my great-grandparents had lived and enjoyed life for 70 years until they passed away, was almost gone. My great-grandfather, Frank Mergel, not only built my mother's house on Commercial Avenue, but also built the house across the street that John Menino later demolished. And by built, I mean himself with a hammer, not a builder. He did. My great-great-grandfather moved the original building that is now the restaurant from Westbrook Golf Course nearly a century ago to where it stands today. The natural growth of trees and fields that had provided a playground as well as peace of mind for generations of my family started to be destroyed one step at a time about 10 years ago when the town allowed John Menino to literally pave over paradise to put up a parking lot. My children hear stories of where and how I grew up, and they cannot make sense of what they see compared to the idyllic place I described. The quiet streets north of Montauk have become busy throughways, more like Nassau County than the small Suffolk hamlet we once knew and loved. There is nothing we can do about the past, the damage is done, but you have the opportunity to do something now to mitigate further damage. In making your decision, if you must approve these permits, please consider requiring these measures. Require Menino's to replace the inadequate 4-foot fence that faces my mother's home with a much higher fence, at least 8 feet. So the back part or the north part of that yellow line. That will help reduce both noise and light. Require significantly more tall evergreen trees be planted along that fence line to fill gaps and provide an effective visual buffer. Require more tasteful, gentle lighting to replace the now harsh lighting that shines into his neighbor's bedrooms, John's neighbor's bedrooms. Establish a maximum allowable decibels level to keep the noise on Menino's side of the street and allow the neighbors to open their windows during spring and summer. Also consider no through traffic signs to deter motorists trying to beat the lights on Montauk. They're now using it to come around fast. And finally, most critically, do not allow a second story that will double capacity in a space already as stuffed as a sausage. There must be some middle ground that will split the difference between the needs of the business and the needs of the residential neighborhood. Thank you.
Dawn Mergel Wegman.
Good evening, board members. I have photos, if I can.
If you hand them up, we'll make them part of the record.
They're just to show the breach that we're talking about with the light shining into the whole front of my house continually at night. My name is Dawn Mergel Wiegand. I live at 23 Commercial Avenue, directly across the street from the back of Menino's restaurant. I have been here before for the same exact reason when all of this started. It has not changed. There's trees that lose their leaves, and all winter long, I am experiencing, it feels like they're turning around on my front lawn, and I can see through, and they're actually in the parking lot. They're not even on my street, but that's how close it is. I'm a third generation to live in my house, and my family once owned the property, which my daughter, we thought I was going to speak first, but that they relocated that building nearly 100 years ago. Many years, even with the restaurant, Commercial Avenue and the homes on it were secluded. My daughter spoke of the natural barrier. People would say, "We didn't even know you were back there." And there was something lovely and charming about it. It's not necessarily the prettiest place, but to us, it meant everything. Currently, the only thing standing between my home and the restaurant is a 4-foot fence and too few arborvitaes. It cannot be called a proper buffer. I'm running out of time.
Take your time,
There's
don't worry.
harsh lights and loud noises. The delivery trucks idle their engines while they're unloading the valet parking. The lights are shining through the gaps in the trees. We hear conversations at night that are like 50 feet from our windows. In addition to the noise, he installed spotlights on the front, on the roof of the property because I guess there was a violation. He was robbed, and but it illuminates the parking lot, but it illuminates my front lawn. And it's my understanding that as long as it stays within the property, that's the guidelines. It shouldn't be shining into my home and my front yard. The traffic on the block has increased dramatically in the past several years, and the parking for the restaurants on Montauk Highway overflow onto our area streets. The house that was taken down, the purple is part of the house that was taken down. The green, that parking lot has not changed since he purchased the property. That is the same parking lot that was for that purple building. That purple on the side was part of that house. So I unfortunately, I was only given this little tiny picture. I didn't have the flip chart so I can actually see what's going on, which is also very unnerving as a resident to not have access to that information. I did go down and spoke to that young lady with the blue jacket on yesterday, and she told me I could print it at home myself. In making your decision tonight, I guess what I'm asking is that you find a way to improve the status quo, not make it worse for the residents. There is not enough parking for the restaurants that currently exist together. And there are signs in that green parking lot that say that it's exclusively for Island Empanada and Menino's. He would not allow anyone else to park in there. So that Chinese food restaurant that still exists, all of those people are parking on that street. And again, circling around, looking and at a high speed, looking for a parking spot. It's devastating. And that map is not recent. Those trees are all gone. Those trees are all gone. That's where it shows my residence, my driveway. I have maybe 4 trees left. And there's another home there now. And they're my neighbors. And just please consider us. when making this decision. With the lighting, the noise, the traffic, that there's not enough parking. There's people storing cars on the side on Forbes Street. You see that big brownout right there. There's a car blocking, but there's all cars in there. Signs are being pulled out. It's just mayhem back there. And I'm sorry, I'm crying. I really thought I was going to be cooler than this, but I was kind of taken off guard with her speaking first, and it kind of threw me off. But I thank you for your time and your consideration. You're so sweet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have any notes in writing that you did not speak about and you want to make part of the record, we'll happily take them and make them part of the record.
Okay.
Those are the only cards we have. Does anyone else wish to be heard on the application? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to Ms. Wozniak for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property is located on the north side of Montauk Highway, approximately 100 feet east of Forbes Avenue in Oakdale, and it's improved with the one-story restaurant building currently occupied by Menino's Italian Restaurant. Tonight, the applicant is looking to modify special permit conditions associated with PB 2016-028 in order to expand this restaurant. The applicant is proposing to increase the square footage of the restaurant by approximately 5,000 square feet, which will include additional basement storage space, a walk-in freezer, and additional space for seating. The previous approval in 2016 included most of these improvements. However, it did not include the basement expansion, which will add almost 2,000 square feet of area for storage. The number of seats is remaining the same, as was already granted by the previous special permit. The applicant is proposing to increase parking on site by expanding the rear parking lot, which will help alleviate any parking issues. In addition, the applicant has provided a valet parking exhibit, which demonstrates how the valet parking operates on Friday and Saturday nights. The proposal is only seeking to improve existing conditions and allowing the restaurant to expand on a previous approval. Based on this, planning has drafted proposed conditions, but the board could reserve decision so that way we can better, draft conditions to address the comments heard tonight and get answers about the parking for the sushi restaurant.
So, Ms. Gill, my first question is the parking calculations you gave us, does that include the 13 spots, which I think we pulled up, that are required to be provided under agreement to the Thai restaurant?
The parking calculations that was for the overall does not include Thai Show. So if you add those, in, I can give you what we'd be looking at.
You're looking at, you said 161, so you're looking at 174, and you have 152, I believe?
We have 144.
144? And you need 174?
And it would be, the required is 161 plus the 13, so 170.
So you're short 30 spots.
I think we need to discuss the Thai Show. It's not part of this application. I understand the intent and I understand the parking stalls, but they're not part of this. We don't own that property on there. And they don't lease the parking that's behind them. We're not forbidding them from going on there. We can talk about how we do that, but they're not signing a lease. They didn't sign a lease with the previous landlord, and they didn't sign a lease with this current landlord. So, and they signed an affidavit saying that they're not using that property, which we submitted, which was only less than a year old. So it's not like it's an old affidavit. They just recently signed it, and they haven't paid for a lot of years. I don't know the exact number of years, but it's been well over 10 years that technically they didn't have access to that parking. So we were going to operate it the same way. We were going to leave it open. If there are people parked there, so be it, but we're still going to operate it the same way that we are. I think the important part is if we focus just on the Menino's portion of the lot where I gave the numbers on, we're increasing substantially the Menino's number of parking stalls. So even if that parking lot operates the same way as it always has, we're increasing the numbers to give Menino's. It's going from 69 to 105 stalls is what we're increasing. So we're substantially increasing the operation, and the seating is staying the same the way it's operated in the last 7 years. So it's not like we're adding 50 seats. We're leaving the seat count is remaining the same, and we're adding additional 37 stalls to be used by the.
Right, but you are you're adding seats, you're trying to legalize seats that you're improperly utilizing.
I'm talking about operationally, just to give an understanding of how it was operating.
I understand that, but to come in here and say what we're doing that's not in compliance with the code is okay, is not acceptable. So I don't,
We want to legalize it. That's the purpose of knocking down what it is and do it the right way.
and I understand that. So my concern is this. You have a limited number of neighbors behind you. The concerns that were raised just now in terms of lighting, size of fence, and some of it may require variance, some may not, and the type of plantings that are there seem something that is very minor in terms of the operations of that restaurant. The fact that, I don't know if outreach was done to those neighbors behind you prior to coming this evening, but the fact that we're here this evening and I have the very few neighbors you have behind you speaking about minor concerns that would address their issues and they have not been addressed, to me is a major problem. I mean, we work with you. Does it provide more parking? Yes. Have we spoke to the town about putting an 8-foot fence up? Do we know that that was a concern of the neighbors? Have we met with the neighbors? Where the pictures that show a tree in place where they could plant an arborvitae there or something that'll grow taller and provide better sound attenuation from what's going on in the parking lot, in terms of maybe Mr. Brown is going to speak about the valet, in terms of moving where the valet cars are, so they're not hearing the clickers going on. My concern is, I see merit in what you want to do, but I'm very concerned that we're here without having that discussion with the neighbors. Many applicants that come before us do outreach to the neighbors and have those discussions, and those issues are much more complex than these minor issues I'm hearing from the neighbors tonight. They seem perfectly reasonable in terms of their requests. They're not saying shut the place down, don't do this. They're asking for, if we're going to do this, if we can do these minor things. So I can tell you where I stand this evening. There are some issues to resolve before I would consider voting to go forward on this. I don't know if you want to speak to that, then I'm going to turn to Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown.
Yes, Mr. Deal. I concur with the chairman, and I think it's an easy fix. With a concentrated effort. I mean, you're talking fencing, you're talking lighting, you're talking maybe moving the area of where the valet, where they are doing valet parking to a different area that's up closer to Montauk Highway on the other side of the property. And the buffer, what is the buffer in the back?
It's on an angle, so at the smallest, it's 9 feet, and at the widest, I think it goes up to about 16, 17 feet.
Right, and we typically require 25 feet and a rear buffer.
We worked on this with the engineering department. We don't need the 25 we have against the residential to the northwest house that we have. You can see the 25-foot buffer around there, but on that rear buffer there, I think it's a 5-foot buffer, right?
Ms. Wozniak, can you speak to that?
Yeah, let me hear it. You have to turn the mic.
I said along Commercial Avenue, they are not required to provide the typical 25-foot buffer because it abuts the street, their property. They are providing it where it's required by our code, which is adjacent to that residential house.
Okay.
So by code, they're not required to provide a buffer along Commercial
Okay,
Avenue.
if it were abuts residential property, we'd need the 25 buffer. Abutting the Commercial Avenue, you don't need that. But what we could do is fence it properly with a heightened fence, landscape it properly, and take care of the lighting. And I think the issues that we're bringing up, and and the neighbors, their issues are, good issues that they're bringing up. It's not far-fetched. It has merit, the application, with the neighbors being taken care of. And that's my opinion.
Understood. So we're going to meet the sound requirements of the town. So if we can get obviously get a violation if we're exceeding that, but we'll make sure that we pay attention to what's going on in the back of the property. As far as the lighting, we've submitted a photometric plan which shows reducing or minimizing any spillage off the back of the property. We have existing arborvitae there. It's probably, I have the same pictures, so it's probably the same pictures, about 12-foot arborvitaes that go across the back.
Right, but there's gaps in between and
understood.
everything like that,
Yep.
as we have.
The previous approved
photos.
site plan had a 4-foot, the 4-foot fence going across, and mainly that was for the headlights of the cars wouldn't go, right, 4-foot height, that's what it's for. If we want to increase that or change it,
I think we
we could.
should
That was the
increase
intent of
it.
the previous site plan, was the 4-foot height with the arborvitae's in front. But if we need to change that part of the application, we can talk about that as well.
I think you have just limited amount of neighbors in the
Yeah.
back. It's not that hard to
Understood.
make them happy
I don't
and
disagree.
be a good neighbor. It's a very successful business that's been there for quite a few years. One other thing while I have you here, do you have any association with the property across the street on Montauk Highway where the old Bronco Charlie's was?
On the south side of,
Yes.
no, we do not.
I wish that was you. I could take you to task right now.
Mr. Frugieri?
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions. You just mentioned photometrics. Is that photometrics of what you're proposing or the existing lighting that's there?
We put a proposed plan together as we move forward with the application.
Okay, so this application proposes to change the lighting that's out there now. That's shining beyond the property line.
Some of the light poles that are existing, because we're not redoing the entire parking lot, so some of the light poles are remaining as is, and there's new ones going in on the proposed parking lot. But we did an assessment of the entire property, and it meets the
Including the wall lighting that might be shining out to beyond the property line?
We can take a
Yeah.
look at that.
Because I'm
it's
sure
all
that
it
any
is.
covenants or restrictions that are drafted are going to have a condition that the light cannot shine beyond the property line.
Fair.
And it's something that would be enforced.
Yes.
And then just a couple of clarifications. The parking calculations that you gave us for the Meninos proper, just the Meninos,
Yes.
does not include parking lot 39, 38, and 37.
Correct.
Okay, so that parking could be used for the other uses but the property owners there refuse to enter into a proper lease with you.
Correct.
That's an issue not for Menino's, but for the sushi restaurant. Because I believe their approval requires them to enter into a lease for a shared parking arrangement. And they probably started for the first couple of years and realized they can get away without paying and just use the lot. And that's wrong.
And same thing, if the lot, all those stalls were regulated to Tai Show, we probably wouldn't purchase the lot. It was sold to him with the purpose that he could use it as a parking lot. But he's willing to use it the same way it's always been used and allow them to park on it. And then
With a proper lease agreement, because you have liabilities.
Yes, so we can, once again, we can talk about, it's not a situation that Tai Show and maybe the town needs to discuss. I don't know how to get involved in that, so.
Yeah, I think it's clear we have a lot of issues to work out. It's not insurmountable, but it's questions that need to be answered before we can act on this.
Further questions from the board? So let me just ask that, we're going to check to see if there are any covenants or restrictions that run with that property that provide for a lease being provided. The problem is, and I'll ask Ms. Wozniak to bring Tai Show before this board if they're not meeting their parking requirements. The problem is if they then want to enter into that lease agreement, which they're required to keep the business open, we have to speak to the additional 13 spots that are now going to be, additional 13 spots you're going to be shy in your parking calculations. So just be aware of that if we come back before us.
And hopefully the overall plan is better than what's existing there now, so that takes into consideration.
Just it should be part of your calculation, so they're not underrepresenting it. And we should also mention the temporary use of the tent outside, just so we know we're dealing with everything. The neighbors know that. I would also just suggest, it seems like they're not insurmountable, but I would ask that you meet with the neighbors that are right behind there. Their concerns are valid. The things they're asking for are very valid. I don't think they're significant in terms of being able to provide those things. Getting along with your neighbors is always a good thing. So I would suggest when we normally close the record that we leave the record open when we come back in reserve, because if the neighbors still have concerns and we have not met with them, I would like to hear that from those neighbors. But I think the application has merit. I think it does add more parking. I think if we can address the fencing issue, the lighting issue, as Mr. Frugieri said, not just the lighting, maybe the lighting on the buildings that's shining through, but speaking to the neighbors, I think you'll get a better understanding of what those issues and concerns are. So if there's nothing else, I'd ask for a motion. Okay. Ms. Frugieri.
I'll make a motion that we leave the record open on this application and reserve decision while the applicant works with the community and planning staff to resolve the issues that we heard tonight.
Thank you. It's my motion by Mr. Frugieri to leave the record open and reserve decision. Is that a second, Mr. Matamore? Second by Mr. Matamore. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? We're reserved. Thank you. And Ms. Wozniak, whatever you can do on Thai Show, if they need to come back before this board, if there's something in the covenants and restrictions that we can bring them back, let's send them a notice and bring them back. Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda, AG MRA 195 13th Avenue LLC, PB 2023-009, east side of 13th Avenue, approximately 440 feet south of Peconic Street, Ronkonkoma, 195 13th Avenue. Applicant requests 2 planning board special permits for the outside overnight parking of registered vehicles and unattached box trailers as an accessory to a warehouse use in the Industrial 1 District pursuant to 68-340.1C and P, respectively. Site plan modifications may also be requested as part of this application. Good evening.
Good evening.
Kelly, can you grab those?
Good evening again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Anthony Guardino, a partner with the law firm of Farrell Fritz in Hopog, New York. I represent the applicant, AG MRA 195 13th Avenue LLC, which is seeking approval to construct and expand an accessory parking lot and 2 special permits, one for outside overnight parking of registered vehicles and another for the parking of outside parking of unattached box trailers, all accessory to an existing warehouse use that is on the property. I have with me tonight to assist in the presentation Andrew Stolzenberg, who is an engineer with Barrett, Bonacci, and Van Weel. I also have Joe Farkas, who's with AG MRA 195 13th Avenue. He's here to answer any questions the board may have. So the property is about a little more than 8 acres in size. It is located at 195 13th Avenue in Ronkonkoma. It sits on the east side of 13th Avenue, just north of Comac Street and just south of Peconic Street. The site is zoned L1. It's in an industrial park there. It is improved with a 1-story, about 102, almost 103,000 square foot warehouse building that is currently occupied by Max Finkelstein wholesale tires. And the adjoining properties in all directions are also zoned Industrial 1 and are improved with existing warehouse, industrial, and or office uses. The property includes to the north a cleared but unpaved area, which is just, like I said, north of the warehouse building, on which the prior owner obtained approval in May of 2021 for an additional warehouse building that would be about 54,000 square feet. That approval is in your packet at Exhibit 6. Since that time, the owner decided not to go forward. Max Finkelstein has given notice of its intent to vacate the premises. So my client, which has now purchased the property, is looking to position the property for a new occupancy that complies with the needs or satisfies the needs of today's industrial warehouse tenant. As it exists today, the property is extremely deficient with respect to parking under the current parking ratio for warehouse buildings. The requirement is about 165 parking spaces. There are only 12 stripe spaces on the site today, so the site is really not marketable. So my client now would like to proceed in lieu of the new warehouse building that was already approved by the planning board and also by the engineering division. Would like to just propose to extend the parking lot over the unpaved portion of the site and to create parking spaces for approximately 62 cars, 53 vans, 12 attached tractor trailer trucks, and 10 detached trailers. And that's shown on the site plan. As you know, in the I-1 district, if you have a special permit from this board, and that's what we're seeking, businesses which involve outdoor and overnight parking of registered vehicles are permitted as an accessory use. The parking is permitted as an accessory use to a permitted principal use. Here, the permitted principal use is in fact the warehouse that's there. But there are certain criteria that you have to satisfy, and this application satisfies all of the criteria for that particular special permit. All the vehicles have to be set back a minimum distance of 50 feet from any street, and that is the case here. They have to be 200 feet set back from any residential use or zone. That's not really applicable here because there are no residential uses or any residential zones in the immediate area. And the vehicles have to be properly screened from view with fencing or landscaping pursuant to the direction of the planning board, and my client intends to do that. In the I-1 district, the outside parking of unattached box trailers is also permitted with a special permit from this board, provided that certain other criteria are satisfied, which this application does meet. First, no trailers can be located in the front yard, and no trailer may be visible from any right-of-way. The trailer parking area has to be set back a minimum of 200 feet from any residential use and 50 feet from any street, very similar to the tractor trailers. All trailers have to be completely screened with fencing or screened from view with fencing, landscaping, berms, etc. at the direction of the planning board. My client will do that. The number of parked trailers cannot exceed 10. So this is limited to 10, 10 max. And they have to be shown on the plan, which they are. The parking area, the trailer parking area, and the stall configuration has to be safely designed and meet the requirements or satisfy the engineering division, which it will. The use of the parked trailers has to be active, integral part of the primary use, which would be the warehouse, which it will be. And then lastly, all trailers that are parked actually have to be registered, which they will be. So this is not a storage facility for unregistered tractor trailers. Again, the site complies with all the requirements. We will need 3 relaxations, one for parking. We are proposing 97 spaces, 165 are required. Landscaping, we need a modest relaxation there, 20%. This is the overall landscaping, 20% is required. We're at 17.9% proposed, and then we need a little bit a greater variance or deviation for landscaping in the front yard. 50% of the overall is required. In the front yard, we're at 24.7%. We do understand, before I call Mr. Stolzenberg, I do understand that the planning department and the board had some comments on the plans that were submitted. Ms. Wozniak did reach out to me back and forth. Unfortunately, my client was not able to give this the consideration it needed, and I couldn't get a site plan prepared in time to be here tonight. But I can assure you that we will work with the planning department and the board to figure it all out. I don't think there's anything there that's really, a deal killer. But there were some questions about parking in the front and where handicap spaces would be located. So we just want a chance to just work through that. We're just not ready to do that tonight. So I have Mr. Stolzenberg to just briefly explain the site plan if you'd like to hear from him.
No, I think the concern is going to be whether or not you'll resolve those issues with Ms. Wozniak and that she's sent to you. And if you can, then I think we're okay.
Yeah.
If not, I suggest when we reserve, you bring him back with you, and we'll have those questions about the site plan on the second go around if you can't make those changes.
And that's fine. I just want to understand, I know there were some issues with landscaping. I think there was an issue with the middle curb cut.
Middle curb cut. Why don't we have Ms. Wozniak do her report, and then we can speak about those specific afterwards. How's that?
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Let me just say, is there anyone here wish to be heard on this application? I do not have any cards. Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The property is located on the east side of 13th Avenue, approximately 440 feet south of Peconic Street in Ronkonkoma. The applicant's looking to obtain a special permit for the overnight parking of 53 vans, 12 tractor trailers, and 10 unattached box trailers on the northern portion of the site. There will be no increase in building size, just an expansion of the parking area to the north to provide for the overnight parking and an increased asphalt area to the east to allow better tractor trailer movement. The application will require an overall landscaping, front yard landscaping, and parking relaxation. Planning would recommend the overnight parking area be shifted to the east, so a berm could be provided to screen the area from view, as is required by the code. It's also suggested that the parallel stalls in front of the building be eliminated So landscaping could be provided in front of the building between the two curb cuts, thus eliminating the middle one, which would increase landscaping, and also match landscaping along 13th Avenue, which is provided by most of the buildings near this site. The drive aisle, also behind the southern parking area, could be shortened to provide additional landscaping. These revisions were discussed with the applicant, however, it's unclear if all of them can be provided. In addition, with some of these improvements, it may eliminate the need for a landscaping and front yard landscaping relaxation, but we won't know that until a new site plan is provided and we get a new landscaping number. So based on this, planning recommends the board reserve decision in order to give time for the applicant to resubmit a site plan showing these suggested improvements and to determine if a landscaping relaxation will actually be necessary.
All right, Mr. Guardino, if you agree to everything Ms. Wozniak said, we can not reserve this evening.
No, I do think we have to just take a look at this. The one that kind of jumps out is that parking in front, and it's not so much about the elimination of the parallel parking space. And I spoke to Ms. Wozniak earlier. We want to look at like I said, the handicap, spaces. They would be far from the front door if those spaces were eliminated. And I understand that they probably meet the code because they're the closest to the front door, but practically speaking, they still might be pretty far away. So, maybe we can remove some of the space, but we'll look at it. I'm certain that we'll figure this out. This is not one of the ones where, you look at this and say, how are we going to resolve this? I think we can resolve it, and we'll just work together like we typically do.
Sounds good. Any questions from the board? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Brown?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, based on Ms. Wozniak's staff report, I'm going to make a motion to reserve decision tonight and close the hearing.
There's a motion by Mr. Brown to close the public hearing and reserve decision. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Bruno. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? We're reserved.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Item 3 on the agenda, Planning Board Public Hearing, Good Footing Group LLC, PB 2023-010, southwest corner of Union Boulevard, County Route 50 and 2nd Avenue Bayshore, 1810 Union Boulevard. Applicant requests a planning board special permit for a mixed-use building in the business district pursuant to 68-257.1G. Site plan modifications are also requested as part of the application. Good evening.
Good evening. Chairman, members of the board, for the applicant, Billy Germano of Germano and Cahill, 4250 Veterans Highway, Holbrook, New York. Also present with me tonight is Mr. Joseph Clemens from German Clemens Architecture, along with the applicant, Dr. Peter Mancuso. I'm first going to provide the board with a set of exhibits, set of pictures labeled Exhibit A through Exhibit D. The property is 0.85 acres in the business district located on the southwest corner of Union Boulevard and 2nd Avenue. The site is improved with a 2.5-story wood frame building and shed, all of which is approximately 9,578 square feet. The building certificate indicates that it was used as a funeral home with an apartment on the 3rd floor. The building was constructed around 1911, according to property records. It was well known as the Sullivan's Funeral Home for many years. The applicant seeks a special permit for a mixed-use building with associated buffer, landscape, and parking relaxations, and, if required, a waiver of the mitigation fee associated with the overall landscape relaxation. The proposal contains medical offices on the 1st and 2nd floors and a 3-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor. I'll just point the board to the Exhibit A for the aerial. The neighboring property is located at 1804 Union Boulevard, and that property also fronts Union Boulevard. It's zoned business district and contains a multi-tenanted detached residential dwelling. Neighboring properties along 2nd Avenue running south are also zoned business district and contain detached residential dwellings. And then the subject property also abuts a residential use located at 43 Bayshore Avenue. In the southwest corner, that particular property split zoned business residential, B residential, and business district. The current proposal is consistent with the various mixed-use buildings, offices, personal services, stores, and apartments along this corridor of Union Boulevard. The site plan is pretty simple. There are 2 curb cuts one on Union Boulevard and one on Second Avenue. Second Avenue is a one-way street that goes south. We provide 41 parking stalls where 50 would be required. A 25-foot buffer is required next to the adjacent residential uses. The proposal provides a 14 to 16-foot buffer on the southern and western property lines. There currently is very little buffer between the existing parking facilities and the neighbor on Second Avenue. So if you look at Exhibit C and Exhibit D, you can see the existing conditions. The home on Second Avenue was actually built within a foot of the shared boundary line. And the 14-foot buffer will be a much improved buffer compared to the existing conditions. And as you can see in the exhibits, there's only a grassy area about 6 feet wide separating the parking facilities and that property. So the proposal will contain a double row of screen trees, which is certainly a substantial improvement from those conditions. The proposal also calls for a 6.6% overall landscape relaxation, but we meet the front yard landscaping requirements. We seek an 18% parking relaxation. The initial application went in, did not require a parking relaxation, but staff requested that we revise the plan to create a drive aisle around the interior portion of the parking lot adjacent to Second Avenue. That required us to remove 6 stalls. Additionally, the initial plan did not account for the medical offices on the second floor, which has a more rigorous parking requirement. But in order to avoid having to come back, we seek the relaxation notice that if and when the applicant is ready to change the use of the second floor from general office to medical office, he wouldn't need to seek further relief from this board in connection with parking. There's an existing apartment on the top floor. Town records indicate that it was a 3-bedroom apartment. We've accounted for that 3-bedroom, those 3 bedrooms in the parking calculations. We've also reviewed the proposed conditions provided by Ms. Wozniak, and we have no objection to them. Final point is, to the extent that the town requires a mitigation fee in connection with the overall landscape relaxation, we seek a waiver of that fee. The fee is projected to be approximately $12,250. It's our position that the mitigation fee would not be appropriate because this proposal improves the existing conditions of a somewhat barren parking lot. The application is essentially reconfiguring a parking lot and doing an interior alteration to accommodate the medical offices. It's not as if this particular project is removing a natural area or part of a discretionary change of zone application. So we are adding a landscape buffer that would actually result in separation between the subject premises and the neighboring residences. Therefore, based on these unique circumstances, we request a waiver of such a mitigation fee.
Thank you. Let's go to public hearing, staff report, and then come back with questions. I do not have any cards. Anybody come in who wish to be heard on this application? Not seeing anyone. I'm going to go to Ms. Wozniak for a report.
Thank you. The subject property is located on the southwest corner of Union Boulevard and Second Avenue in Bayshore, and it's improved with a 2.5-story non-conforming mixed-use building with offices on floors 1 and 2 and an apartment on the 3rd story. Tonight, the applicant is looking to convert the office space into medical office space. The single apartment is going to remain on the 3rd story. However, because this is considered intensifying the use, the applicant must now obtain the required special permit. There's going to be no increase in building size, but there will be site work conducted, which includes providing buffers to the west and south and reconfiguring the parking lot. The applicant will need an overall landscaping relaxation as much of the landscaping falls within the buffer area and does not count toward the landscaping calculations. In addition, a buffer relaxation will be required as a 25-foot buffer would eliminate much needed parking. However, a significant increase in current buffers is provided and the site will comply with the front yard landscaping requirement. The applicant will also need a slight parking relaxation of approximately 18%, as some parking was reconfigured to create better on-site circulation. The applicant has also requested a waiver of the landscape mitigation fee. Although the applicant is increasing existing landscaping on site, the applicant is also proposing to intensify the use, which requires more parking and therefore more asphalt to displace landscaping. So planning would recommend the applicant pay a certain percentage of the landscape mitigation fee based on this intensification. So if the board feels the waiver is warranted, planning could add this waiver to the proposed conditions.
Thank you. So Ms. Wozniak, maybe you can answer this. The way that the lot is currently set up, is that approved? Obviously not, it does not meet the buffer, or?
I would need to go back and see if there is an older approved site plan, but, I mean, the building itself, I think the most recent CO was a funeral home. So
Right.
that's kind of,
That would be my main concern. One is I agree with Ms. Wozniak's point. I understand your point that you are increasing the landscaping there. However, we are asking to intensify the use. We're not using its current use. We want to intensify the use that's going to go on there. So there is some benefit if we approve this evening. My one concern remains, as we just spoke in an earlier application about neighbors, is the fact that it may be existing, but if it's not currently approved, we could take action against them. I'm not sure if your parking calculations tell you that you need all these spots for the uses that you're going to have. If the answer is no, we can talk about land banking parking. That possibly would help with some of the buffers in some of the areas and make up for that problem and that I see.
One moment, please. I guess the question that we have is, the stream part, it seems a little bit difficult to land bank those. I don't know how we would accomplish that without losing, that would be a significant loss of
Mr.
parking.
Gemano, I'm speaking with the chairman, and I was of the same thought pattern as his. If you don't really, and you don't feel you need the amount of spaces that we're requiring with the use right now, and based on your experience with your clients, where the lawn is now, where you're proposing to take out all the grass and put parking, what our suggestion is, you're going to 16 feet in the back with your buffer right now, which would be on the southern end of the property. I think you're at 16 feet, 6 inches. If we can get to 25 feet there, put a real nice buffer against the residential neighborhood, transitioning into the neighborhood there. And you have the lawn on the other side that you're taking out to put a parking lot. If we're land banking spots in that area, they're still part of the calculation for parking. So I think we could better screen going into the neighborhood with a better buffer. And there's no buffer there right now, really. It's minimal at best. So if we could put a better buffer in the back and maybe look at land banking some of the ones where the lawn is existing today and come up with a realistic parking calculation that we need.
Can I just, on that point, turn to Mr. Bruno, who has some suggestions? Mr. Bruno?
Mr. Clements, can you kind of come up here a minute? Because there's something I'd like to show you. I think there's a way to increase a couple of spaces and help you out with a few things.
Sure.
You see how you've got the aisle, you've got the handicap spaces and all against the other spaces?
Yeah.
if you flip them to be on the building side, I think because now you've got that curve, if you square that, you're going to pick up more spaces. I
And
think
just
you're going to pick up
eliminate the
about
dri-
2 spaces over there. You with me?
Flip them to the other side.
And what'll happen is you'll no longer need the 20 feet because you won't have spaces abutting each other.
Mhm.
So in both cases, you're going to pick up 2 more feet because they can both go down to 19. Am I right about this, or?
If you flipped it along the curb line, then yeah, those would go
Right.
to 19 feet and the 20-foot. Yeah, I have to see how it would play with the original, but yeah, theoretically, we potentially pick up a couple feet.
Okay. And that'll also get your handicap spaces right abutting the building, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's my suggestion, is look at that and see. But what I'm saying is I think you may pick up 2 spaces and 2 feet.
Yep. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, further questions from the board?
Just a comment. I think the application is a good application, and I think just going back to the planning department to work with the parking lot and coming up with just a little bit tweaked design. So I think it would be better for us to reserve tonight to do that.
And also, I think you need to have that discussion with planning regarding the mitigation fee. That needs to be resolved. Just defer, Jerry.
The site plan shows the 18 by 24 shed that's proposed to stay. Is that something that's needed? I mean, when it was a funeral home use, it was probably needed for storage. But for medical offices, I don't know if you're going to be storing equipment out in a shed. That might be another area where you can pick up some parking. That's just a suggestion. I'm not opposed to the shed. If you need it, you need it. But if you don't need it, it's an area where you could pick up some spaces.
That's something we'll consider.
Okay.
So, Mr. Romano, based on the comments, I think we're going to reserve the decision this evening, let you work with planning staff to resolve those few issues.
Very good. Thank you.
And if we can resolve them quickly, we can get you on for the next meeting.
Appreciate it.
Anything further you want to add?
Nothing good.
Is there a motion? Mr. Brown?
Mr. Chairman, based on the discussion tonight, I'd like to make a motion to close the hearing and reserve decision tonight.
It's a motion by Mr. Brown to close the public hearing and reserve decision. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Matamore. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? We reserve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 4 was adjourned. Item 5 we heard. Item 6 on the agenda, planning board application, decision item KCE NY 29 LLC, PB 2022-028, southeast corner of Rabbroad Drive and Wheeler Road, State Route 111, Hop-Hog, 220 Rabbroad Drive. Applicant requests a planning board special permit for a Tier 3 battery energy storage system pursuant to 68-456F3. Applicant also requests a waiver of fencing requirements as outlined in 68-456G. In order to permit a visual and sound barrier wall instead, site plan modifications may also be requested as part of the application. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. John Anzalone of Powers Beach, PLLC, 333 Earl Ovington Boulevard, Suite 901, Uniondale, New York, 11553, attorneys for the applicant. Thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation to you tonight. As you mentioned, this is an application for a Tier 3 battery energy storage system and a related variance related to a proposed wall, which is proposed to be a visual and sound barrier at the property located at 220 Rabbroad Drive, Hop-Hog, New York, which the applicant is in contract to purchase. As a reminder, the proposed facility would interconnect directly into the electrical grid with the existing LIPA substation located directly north of the site across Rabbroad Drive. Since the public hearing last year, we have worked with the town planning department to provide a decommissioning plan, which the board requested for its review. The plan was prepared by Key Capture Energy together with its design professionals, H2M architects and engineers, representatives of which are both here today to answer any questions this board may have regarding the decommissioning plan. In response to certain questions raised by this board regarding the location of the off-site monitoring of the project once in operation, we submitted written responses on January 5th to summarize. While the location of the control center for the site is subject to selection during the construction phase. All of Key Capture Energy's most recent best facilities located in New York and Texas, or including those that are under construction today, are all monitored by Merit Controls. Merit is headquartered and maintains an office at 46 East Main Street, Suite 302, Somerville, New Jersey. The monitoring location, however, does not impact the team's ability to dispatch local responders, i.e. its operations and maintenance personnel, fire department, and local police department on a timely basis. Finally, as is customary, the applicant received the town planning department's recommended conditions of approval should this board be willing to grant the application. Key Capture Energy has reviewed those conditions and would agree to them if they were adopted by this board. The applicant and its experts are all here to answer any questions this board may have. Otherwise, we respectfully request this board to grant the application. On behalf of my client, we thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Ms. Wozniak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The application was previously heard in November in the board reserved decision in order to allow appropriate conditions to be drafted and to give the applicant time to submit a decommissioning plan. The applicant has since provided the decommissioning plan to be a part of the record and as is required by the town code. Ms. Cruz had also requested information on where the BESS would be monitored from, and the applicant has stated that the exact location where the site is to be monitored from is currently unknown because they're selected once the facility is under construction. However, the final monitoring location won't impact the team's ability to dispatch local responders. Based on this, planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions, which limit the height of the battery storage containers to 12 feet and require superior landscaping along the street frontages to help screen the equipment from view.
You're in full agreement with the conditions?
Yes.
As stated by Ms. Wozniak. Are there any further questions from the board? Applicant want to add anything further?
No, sir.
Is there a motion? Mr. Brown?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion to grant the application based on Ms. Wozniak's staff report and also based on the fact when the covenants and restrictions are executed.
It's a motion by Mr. Brown to grant the application based upon the agreement of the covenants and restrictions. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Bruno. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The application is granted. Thank you.
Have a good night.
That's it.
Maybe get them in the
Item 7 was adjourned on the agenda this evening. Is there a motion to adjourn by Mr. Matamore? All in second by Mr. Brown. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? We're adjourned.